Okay.
Okay. If you'll, so they'll know what I look like. I don't know most of you personally. Some of you are former students, but most of you I've never met in person. So I'm Walter Heath. I'm the guy that stumbled into this stuff. I want to welcome all of you. I think, as a rule, as soon as other people get some finished lusters, that we'll have a Zoom meeting maybe next week. Depends on how fast people say that they have something to share. So we'll Zoom on that. Once you get into this stuff, you'll find it's very difficult to capture in pictures and even in video, depending on the light. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to give you a quick course on application of a fired glaze. The glaze for this study needs to be the glaze that I sent you, because it's balanced to either cone 06 or to 012, and you know which one you have. Okay, so you've got these little packets, containers of pigment, and they're labeled. Everything that I did on the sample that I sent you, there's a dot reference which tells you that in this case it's 653, and that happens to be this pigment, which is called russet red.
Pearl X.
Well, Pearl X is the company. Jacquard, I think, distributes it, and you can get it even at Michael's and what you call Hobby Lobby in little kits. A little bit of this goes a long way. The samples that you have, I don't know if some of you haven't seen the raw pigment, it's quite beautiful. It's incredibly fine. So you need to treat it as far as if you happen to start using dry materials. Remember, it'll really float in the air, and it's silica, because all of the pigments that we're using are all a very fine mica. Mica is a naturally occurring flat plate of silica, and because it's transparent, it has some rather unusual characteristics. Mica, if you're old enough to see a wood stove that has these sheets of things in the little window, that was the first high temperature glass that they used in stoves to be able to see inside. So again, be careful. Don't, if you're using it, if you're converting it from powder to liquid, wear a mask, and let whatever breeze there is in the room or outside be coming from your back away from you. Okay, it's not a big deal, but keep it in mind. Okay, now what I did with this material here is that I took a teaspoon, and I took a heaping teaspoon and put it in one of these containers, dry. Then I added enough water to it to make it the consistency of thick cream. Okay, and then when I got it to that point and well mixed, then I added Elmer's school glue to it. The reason I used Elmer's school glue is that Elmer's school glue can dry, and you can resaturate it and use it again. So when I first started doing this with acrylics, I used acrylic medium or regular Elmer's glue, which doesn't reconstitute. It's kind of waterproof. So I knew that it would be a big advantage to be able to, for one, dry out what that I was getting ready to send you, and I wouldn't have to worry about the lid coming off because what was in it was dry. Okay, so On an early posting, when people started receiving the materials, I requested that you open each container up and add two teaspoons of water to it. That reconstitutes it into a paste. It can dry completely out. All you got to do is add water to it. Okay. So when I first started using these, I have these cheap black bristle brushes. Turned out it's really, really nice for applying the lusters the way that I do. This is only the way I do this. My hope in having the study is everybody will figure out different ways in the way that they do things to get different results. So I've got water, and I've got my brush. I usually wet my brush first, no matter what I do with glaze or whatever, because it's easier to clean afterwards. So I dampen my brush, and then this is the water that I'm going to use because I'm going to save all my pigments that I don't put on the piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some thick paste, and I sent you each one of these mixing things. These are all the ones that I sent out are glazed with the luster number 3, which is the one that works at 06 with these lusters. I started painting with these luster pigments long before I figured out how to use them this way. So what I found out was that if they have a dark background, they're much more beautiful to me than if they have a white background. So that's the way I use them. Now I'm gonna get my paste, because there was water in the brush. You'll see that it gets more liquid with just a little bit of water. Okay, so what you need to know about applying is that what you see that's very thick and dries as a paste is where there's going to be the most pigment when you clean it off after the luster firing. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, I've got this is a piece that's been sent through a luster firing of 06. You'll notice, depending on the thickness of the black glaze, the thicker it gets, the more dark red it turns. The reason for that is in the unfired piece, the one that's only been fired to cone 6, all of the iron that's in the glaze is in saturation. When you refire it, it takes some of the iron that's dissolved in the glaze, and it recrystallizes. So that's why there's a difference between this and that in relation to the glaze. So I have found that if you can get a balance between if you can get the glaze thin enough to give you a good glossy surface, it stays blacker because it has less iron dissolved in it to recrystallize. Okay? So I've got this. I'm going to put it over here because this has not been cleaned off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to glaze this piece in a similar way than I glazed that piece. So you'll have an idea of moving the pigments around on the piece. So before I do that, and I've got some pretty thick glaze pigment here, I want to show you that, again, it's hard to see, and I want to make sure you get the reflection. Okay, you can do very fine things with this in this kind of pasty kind of form. And if you're good with a brush, you could probably do nice lines and brush strokes and things like that. What you see there, if you look closely, is it's very thick at the dab closest to you, and it's thinning out towards me. Okay, so the really neat thing about this is what you're seeing is what you're going to get when you luster fire. So what you see is what you're going to get, but it's going to be less concentrated. So you're going to get the most amount of pigment showing after the firing, where it's pasty, and when it dries, it's actually pasty looking. It's not glossy. And as you thin it out, you see more and more of the glaze, and that holds true in the fusion process of the luster firing. Okay, so you can do very, very fine things with different colors if you want of the pigments, and accomplish many things that I can't do with the brush now. Okay, but I find for doing areas, I find this bristle brush really quite handy because you can put pressure on it and thin out the pigments. Okay, so I'm just going to do a rough thing like this and get it all spread out. Again, for now, there's nothing toxic in these pigments, and there's nothing toxic in the glaze. The different colors that you have are only derived from titanium coating on the pigment and combinations of iron and rutile. So that's all that's in there. I'm personally pretty comfortable with it on the inside of something, but this is all new. This is way new to me. Okay, so I get it all spread out, and then I just touch my brush in the water, and I get it liquid. Painting on glass, I was a painter before I was a potter. Painting on glass is one of the most enjoyable things that I do now. And just keep moving around till you get what you want. Okay? Now, this piece here this piece here looked like this. I'm gonna blow the bubbles out. It looked like this, almost exactly like that. Okay, so you can see it got the pigments got more transparent in the application, and you can see, if you look closely, you can see beautiful, beautiful variations of thick and thickness just caused by the pigments and the pressure of the brush as you apply it to the glaze. Okay. Now I'm not going to have time in this video, but there's a bubble there. I'm a very, I don't know, I'm a very anal kind of person in my work, so I have a tendency to want to make things exactly the way that I want them. What I've learned with this particular process is, because I don't know what something's going to do, I shouldn't try to change it. So this, because of the bubbles, you can see there's a little, where the bubbles broke, there's a little glaze showing through. My guess is it was also in this one. It's hard to see. And by the way, my eyes are very bad. Now, I'm going to set this down, and I'm going to wash this one off. If you look closely where the pigment is very thick, like on what I was doing when I started, you can see that it's very dense and pasty looking on the surface. Okay. Now, I really prefer the idea of saving these pigments. If you get into buying, very many of them, some of them are much more expensive than others, and they're pricey. So I also like the idea of using them over and over and over, because you usually don't get to do something like that in ceramics. It's one-way trip. But in this particular case, I've posted videos of both a master in Kashan, Iran, cleaning off a piece, and then I just posted a few minutes ago, yesterday, one of John Kurzweil. He's in Australia, and he goes regularly to Iran to study with the masters, and he's certainly considered a master himself in traditional Persian lusters. He's the only reason I figured this out when I did, because he was very patient and sharing with the concepts of traditional Persian lusters to where I could try to figure out a way to apply them to a non-toxic electric kiln-fired system. So I'm going to clean this off. If you look in this is right now my scrap. I kind of decided I wasn't going to try to keep the pigments separate. All you have to do is have a plastic Tupperware bowl for each color, and if the piece you have has one color on it, wash it into that, and you'll have the same pigment to use again and again and again and again. This, I had several pieces that came out of our bisque firing that this was in, that I'm preparing for an exhibit. They had, some of them had 4 different pigments worked into the surface of the black glaze, on the surface, and now fused. So when I scrubbed them off, this is what I got. And I kind of like the idea of the conglomerate, because I've tried it. From the very beginning, I've done conglomerate reclaim, and it's kind of fun because, for one, I keep it in a tea bowl, kind of like this, and so there's layers of when I have clean the bowl. So I never know what I'm going to get, but what I know is it's a combination of everything that I've used. So that's the way I do it. I'm sure somebody will figure out a better way. But as soon as you put it in water, the pigment that's not fused starts coming off. I don't know where you can see that. Hard for me to see, so I don't know. But anyway, you put it in. I have a basin that's my reclaim, that I wash everything. I scrub everything with a pot scrubber, and I scrub it really hard, because I'm only interested in what's fused into the surface of the glaze. For one, it has this wonderful character that I just never experienced. I've been doing this for over 40 years, and this has probably excited me as much as anything over the years. And of course, at this stage, it's the most exciting thing to me. For one, I don't know very much about it. So you scrub, and it comes off pretty easily, actually. So what you're going to see when I dry it off, is you're going to see, depending on the light, you see the luster. Depending on the light, you don't see the luster. And at the same time, you see different versions of dark glaze in the back because of the influence of the thick and thin of the luster. Now, if I continue to, I'm slowly letting the lusters creep inside my functional pieces. What I'm going to do, and what I've done with the ones that I've done where it goes into the rim. This is very subtle, but it's lustered on the rim and has a drip going down. Can you see that? Okay, so what I do on the inside of pieces that I've made is after I do the initial scrub, I wash it off in water, and then once I've got everything clean to that stage, I go back into the functional area, in this case the inside of the bowl and the rim, and I use cleansing powder like Comet, and I scrub it again just to make sure I've gotten all the particles. Chances are you could eat this stuff straight out of the jar because all it is silica and iron and titanium and rutile, but rutile is iron and titanium and there's a trace of manganese. Okay, so that's the transition that you will experience between application. Think when you're applying, think overdoing it in relation to what you see of the luster pigment, because it's gonna become very subtle in a luster firing. Okay. Now, I want to say a word about scrubbing because I just did it. I got this piece out. This is one of the ones that I'm preparing to do an 012 firing. I'm actually I'm not going to get it done today, but tomorrow I'll be doing the first full load of lusters that I've ever done because it's time. But what I wanted to do is I put this tape here because there's an area of folded clay with glaze on it. If you can you see that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So when you scrub with a pad, you don't necessarily get all of it because you can't abrade it, and it needs to be abrade. So I sent you each one of these cut off black bristle brush to scrub in areas that that you can't get to with the scrubbing pad. You might find a better brush, a stiffer brush, a smaller, stiffer brush. But on pieces that, if that happened to be in fact, on this bowl when I was doing the scrubbing with cleansing powder, I put it on this brush and I scrubbed into that kind of area to make sure that there's not just some loose pigment just floating there. Okay? Now, a word about the other brush I sent you. I'm a big fan of fan brushes. I'm gonna leave it here because I want to do something. A fan brush has a completely different character when you apply pigments to the glaze. I'm going to dampen it. I have a whole collection of these. Some of you got one this size. Some of you got one that was smaller. But the function of it is the same. If if you load just the edge of your fan brush and you go to somewhere in the center of the pot and you wash it this way, you get this wonderful, I don't know, fan-like distribution of the pigments. You can go back into that and do it again if you wish. You can let that dry, or it doesn't even have to be dry. And you can go back into the other side and do something similar and leave that section in the middle as a design element. I really recommend not putting luster over the whole pot for now, to where you can see the interplay between not putting luster and having areas of raw glaze, because it's a significant contrast even when it's subtle. Okay. There's that. I wanted to be sure and tell you if you do something like this, I think this is dry enough to do it, but you should be able to see it. You can take something sharp, and of course whatever sharpness it is, you can take something sharp or even something small and dull, and you can draw in it. Can you see those little black?
Yeah.
So it's kind of sgraffito, okay? When you fire this and you scrub it off, those lines will be exactly like you do them. So you can get very elaborate by glazing a piece like this. You could glaze it very thick, knowing that you're going to get less variation of dark and light. You'll get more luster, and you can draw in it. And here, this is a stylus that I use. Actually, I use this to sign pots. And if you do something with it, it has a completely different character. Did I hit some soft glaze? But regardless, keep in mind the possibilities of this are endless, and I have no idea what that means as far as the end. Okay? There's that. Let's see. I think that's it. So now I'm going to show you. I clean all of my tools in the water. And as far as the, I guess you could call this a palette, even though you only put one color in it. In the palette, what you can do is you can spray water is better because you don't lose pigment. You can spray it and make it very liquid. And then I usually pick out a little pointy thing on that, and I pour it back into my main source for that particular pigment. And I get as much as possible from that. And then I drop that in the water, and then there's a lot of pigment in this brush, okay? So what I do is that I hold it on the edge and I squeegee it out. And then I give it a quick spray, put a little more water in it, and squeegee it again. And that gets a lot of the pigment out, okay? So I still have virgin pigment here. It's not been contaminated by another color of luster, okay? So then I obviously wash this out into the reclaim. Okay, and I'll go rinse that in the sink later. I do the same thing with my brushes that I've used with that pigment, or it could be a combination. I always wash my brushes between pigments. It's just my way. Not required, just my way. And then I rinse out as best I can, hopefully almost all of the pigment that I have in my brushes. And then I put this aside. I let it, in this case I'm doing a whole bunch of lusters, so and same thing with this, I squeeze it out as much as I can so I get the maximum amount of pigment that's in there. And then shortly after I turn the video off, I'll take these three things, I'll take them to the sink and I'll wash them out very well, because of the medium that's in the pigments, the Elmer's school glue, when it does set up, it's harder to get out than if it's not there. I'm talking about the care of the brushes. But the big advantage is if you happen to have one that you don't get clean and you get a buildup on the brush, all you really have to do is soak it and clean it out, and then take that water that you soaked it in and dump it in here, and you'll still get all the pigments. Okay? I think I've covered everything. Again, please, for the time being, the rule of thumb is to only use the lusters on the outside of functional pieces. I'm going to, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this study, and we all produce pieces, once we get well down the road in the study, I want to publish it on Clay Buddies and share all the information, because then we do need to have the discussion in the ceramic community to find out what seems to be acceptable with these on the inside of functional pieces. I have a piece that I broke that's from an 06 luster firing. I broke it, and I've taken it, and it's soaking in a jar of coffee. It has been for about, I don't know, a couple months. So I'm trying to stain it. So far, my experience in cleaning it is that when you clean the unfused pigment, it's done. It's there. And that's the whole way that Persian lusters were developed at lower temperatures. And in the case of Persian lusters, you have to have a gas kiln to fire the luster on in very heavy reduction in order to get the colors they want, because they use mostly metallic salts, which is also what they use in resin-based lusters. It's kind of the European way. Both are toxic when you fire them. In the case of resin, even the fumes from using in the case of those, they use lavender oil as a medium. But the fumes from even application are toxic. Firing them are very toxic. And after they're fired, the ones that are done with resin aren't really fused into the surface of the glaze. I think, I haven't taken microscope images yet, which is very high on my list. I have a microscope to do it. Is to see, magnify 1,000 times and say, this is what it looks like on the surface. And that'll help us all make a decision on what to do in relation to the inside of functional pots. But again, even if there's particles of these pigments, all they are is silica with a coating of titanium and maybe an addition to the titanium of iron or rutile. Those are the pigments that we're working with. There are some pigments, when you go to the MSDS sheet on them, they say something like one of the ingredients, it says like titanium, iron, rutile, in blue color. I think it's probably a stain, but I don't know what's in the stain. So I don't use those on the inside of anything yet. And I wanted to keep that variable out of the study. I wanted to keep everything, as far as the MSDS sheet, non-toxic. Both the powder, the application, and the firing. And of course, the results. Okay? I think I covered everything that I wanted to today. I'm, as usual, very, very, very far behind with my time. So probably what I'm going to have to do is start fresh in the morning and start doing the the application of the lusters for the firing, because I have quite a lot of pieces. Let me grab one of those pieces I told you that were larger. I'm doing a bunch of wall pieces, so I have the comfort of being able to use any of these pigments because they're on non-functional wall pieces. So this particular one is the 06 glaze, the 06 luster glaze, the one that I designated in the group as luster number 3. Okay. The reason it's luster number 3 is it's 3 parts by volume of red art and 1 part by volume of borate. These are glazed very thick. Okay, very, very, very thick. This piece, you can see, it's same glaze, okay, but it's applied thinner. So the thicker the glaze gets, like I said, you get these red browns. They're quite beautiful. But as we all use it more and more, we'll be able to control what we do, because hopefully our firing will be consistent. Okay? I'm sorry, I picked up the wrong one. This is the one. And I don't know whether you can see it, but this one, the small one, had a somewhat thinner coating of the black glaze, so it's less red than this is. See it? Can you see that, or is it? maybe you can't see. But when you reflect it around, this one has more black background than this one does. Okay? Now, of course, if you were here, I could say any questions, but I can't. So ask your questions on the comments with the video, which I'm going to post very shortly. And as I start doing more things for the firing tomorrow, I'm going to ask Bahare to help me do a video of things I'm going to do. Just to give you an idea, these pieces have relief, and I'm going to be inlaying luster into the cavities of this, particularly the fish. On this one, just the fish. And then I'm going to fire it to 012. Now, I have a code reference that I use because I'm using both glazes, both the 012 and the 06. If you fire the 012 glaze to 06 in the luster firing, it pinholes, and I've found almost without exception the studio glazes that we use, the luster firing at 06 pinholes them. So as far as the study's concerned, please only work with the glaze that I sent you. And then you're going to certainly experiment with other glazes. One thing that is going to be very valuable is to identify common glazes that we can use with this technique. I can tell you Val's turquoise will pinhole at 06, but it makes a beautiful, beautiful luster at 012. There's a lot of fusion there. So if you want to try other glazes, I highly recommend, even if you're using the luster number 3 for 06, you can use it at a lower cone than 06, say 012. A lot of these pieces are glazed that I'm doing are glazed with the luster number 3. It will fuse pigments, but much more subtly and much more quietly. Okay? So, that's it. Let's get after it. Talk to you later. Bye.